broadcast of It's Time with Reverend Nathaniel W. Martin. Here's Reverend Martin.
All right, thank you, Dr. Blackwell. And let me say Hotep Habaragani to my Africana Studies colleagues, contemporaries, and seekers after truth, all. And let me also say good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, or certainly never good night, and never ever goodbye, because I've always found goodbyes traumatizing. I said I personally have always found goodbyes traumatizing. My name is the Reverend Nathaniel Wayne Martin. I'm the pastor of the New Life Institutional Baptist Church here in the city of Los Angeles, and we're worshiping with our sister church, the Shiloh Missionary Christian Church, pastored by my good friend, Dr. Della F. Holliness, and we're located at 8916 South Main. That's 8916 South Main. And you're invited and welcome to come and worship with us at any and all of our services. This offering that you are viewing or looking at or listening to, as the case may be, however, is not a preaching session, although it probably should be. but it centers on the social gospel and activism that we all should be following. I think Jerry Falwell said that Jesus was not a social activist. I dare to demur. Jesus was very definitely a social activist. He went against the grain. That's why they killed him. Because he was interfering with their finances, with their methods, with their methodologies, with their social conventions. He was messing up their processes. When he goes out to heal the sick without a insurance voucher, or without a hospital, without a clinic, and without having a license to do healing from one of the accredited conservative or liberal colleges there in Jerusalem, certainly he was bucking the system. And that is what we're trying to do. We're trying to break out the universities. Yes, the university has been enclosed behind ivory walls for so long, and the message needs to get out. And one thing this pandemic did allow for a lot of us that don't normally read to get a chance to read, or look at some lectures on YouTube, or listen to some professors who, because of the pandemic, had to post their lectures. I never met Professor Tricia Rose until the pandemic. Then I found out that she lectured at Brown University on the effects of structural racism. And she said structural racism is the legitimized and normalized patterns of behavior, which have been made normal, although they were not normal in the original, but because of their repetition and their preponderance, it has been racism. In other words, structural racism has been normalized. I didn't know anything about Professor Tricia Rose until the pandemic, and I began to see her lectures up there on YouTube. I began to see Professor Dr. Joy DeGrew's lectures on post-traumatic slave syndrome up there on YouTube. In fact, I contacted her and got some of her material. But the pandemic allowed a lot of us to jailbreak the university, so that classes that you would not normally get unless you were enrolled in a college or university. And then that was only on a limited basis, so that people who could not get in the class did not get that information, even if they could have afforded it, which most of us have been out there doing the grind, trying to work all of our lives. So we were not able to take time out to go to school once we got married and started raising children and started trying to pay a house note and keep a roof over the head and keep food in the kids' mouths and clothes on their backs and shoes on their feet and pay for their education. Well, we were not privy, as it were, to this abundance of information. And so the Dr. what is his name? Greg Carr and Professor Karen Hunter, who has a show on Sirius, says they've been trying to jailbreak the university. And I think it's good we can jailbreak the university because given the book bannings in the state of Florida and in many other states, we're going to have to start getting on these PTA boards and getting in these book approval and publishing committees and commissions, because if we want our children going forward to get a full education, and what I mean when I say full education is the same thing the judge means when they give you the swear you in court and say, do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? And that is what is missing in most of our classrooms. We get snippets, we get portions, we get parts. American history starts raggedly, and therefore, if you start in the middle of history and you omit that antecedent, then you cannot say that you have thoroughly justified this history class, even though you got a degree, whatever magnitude or order it is, be it AA or even up to master's or a PhD. You need to have the whole spectrum of history, and you cannot start in the middle of history and say that you know the whole of history. Dr. John Henry Clark said you can start in 1619 and say that is all of the history of the colored man or the Negro people in America, because you got 10,000 years before that and 25,000 years before that. Remember, Greece was not even in existence when the Chinese began. The Chinese were already 5,000 years old when the Greeks began to come on the scene. So you can't limit history to just Greece. Lord have mercy. Because the Greeks had sense enough to base their history on the African conquest, the Egyptian conquest. Remember, Greek literature and Greek intellect was embedded in the temples of Thebes in Egypt, and their scholars consumed and digested the books that were in Kemet, as we called it, or Egypt as they called it, the Greek, they being the Greeks. And but remember, you had other civilizations before Greece. You know, somebody built those pyramids, and it wasn't the Greeks, because the Greeks didn't come on the scene until late in the era. And the pyramids had been built, the Sphinx had been built, and civilization was on the march, and had gone through at least 25 dynasties of kings and rulers in Egypt, long before the Greeks began to become a power in the earth. And so you can't limit yourself to Greece and say that is the standard by which the rest of the world is judged, because even the Greeks had the sense enough to know that there was somebody before them. All right, enough of that. Scripture, Ephesians 6th chapter, picking up the reading at this particular verse here, verse number 10. Finally, my brethren, be strong in the Lord and in the power of his might. Put on the whole armor of God, that you may be able to stand against the wiles of the devil. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. Wherefore take unto you the whole armor of God, that you may be able to withstand in the evil day, and having done all, to stand. Stand therefore, having your loins girt about with truth, and having on the breastplate of righteousness, and your feet shod with the preparation of the gospel of peace. Above all, taking unto you, taking the shield of faith, wherewith ye shall be able to quench all the fiery darts of the wicked, and take the helmet of salvation and the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of God, praying always with all prayer and supplication in the Spirit, watching thereunto with all perseverance and supplication for all saints, and for me, that utterance may be given unto me, that I may open my mouth boldly to make known the mystery of the gospel, for which I am an ambassador in bonds, therein I may speak boldly as I ought to speak. And you can't stress this enough, folks, especially where Paul says to the Ephesian church that we wrestle not against flesh and blood. You're not wrestling over against the human people that you can see, but you're wrestling against the structures, you're wrestling against the ideas, the outlines, and the underlying system that undergird these flesh and blood. And so when you talked about principalities, against powers, and against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. That is where we are today. I'm sure you've been aware that this very week we've had a very cataclysmic week in the Congress, whereby the Matt Gaetz was able to put out Kevin McCarthy here from the speakership here in the House, there in the House of Representatives, and the Republicans have shown this week that they are not unfit to govern. Now they got to call another speaker before they can do any House business that is necessary. And thank God that at least Kevin McCarthy had the foresight to ask the Democrats to help him to extend the budget ceiling, the debt ceiling, so that we can at least get over into the month of November before we have another debt crisis. Remember, you don't know if these Republicans are going to be able to agree on another speaker. They may take them a month. Remember, it took 16 ballots to put Kevin McCarthy in as House Speaker. And he made a covenant with the devil, yes. And the devil was Matt Gaetz. And the devil called in his marker and put him back out. You can have an agreement where you can get put out if just one person don't like it. No. Nancy Pelosi was smarter than that. She at least had a 50-person cushion before you could begin to gather up a vote. Matt Gaetz would have had to go get 49 other people to be on his side. And somebody would have told him no. That this is outlandish and outrageous, and it's irresponsible and reckless, childish, selfish, egotistical, and all of those words whereby you describe someone who is myopic in their thinking and selfish in their views. Well, that's as narcissistic as Donald Trump. You're only thinking about yourself, me, my foe, and no more. And but no, that's why what's the name? Nancy Pelosi was able to be so powerful because she could count. And she said, you can't rule if one person can challenge your speakership. And that is why she was able to be successful and get some bills passed and get some legislation passed, in spite of the fact that some of her own people in her Democratic caucus would be against her. But they had to get 50 people before they could come to Nancy Pelosi and say, well, we're going to challenge you for the speakership. And then they had to get a vote. And they had to win the vote overwhelmingly. One thing Nancy Pelosi said she could do was count votes. And so McCarthy was playing a fool's errand in the first place. And the Bible says the wages of sin is death. And he fulfilled his ego, yes, his pride, but he wasn't able to do anything for the country, except as he was on his way out the door. Remember, he was trying to impeach the president, President Biden, and still has that impeachment on the floor. So there's no tears to be shed for Kevin McCarthy. He got the deal that he wanted. He wanted to be Speaker of the House at whatever cost, at whatever risk, and he risked it, and it cost him. All right? But now you see the chaos that the extreme elements of the MAGA Republicans who are in Congress, remember, all of those people climbing up on those buildings, the people that were climbing up on those buildings were the ones who got arrested. But you had 139 to 149 congressional legislators in the Congress, in the House, that supported those people that were out there. The people on the outside had been able to collude with the naysayers on the inside, led by what's his last name, Cruz from Texas. Then they would have completed their overthrow of democracy as we know it here in America. And remember, this nation has never been a democracy because it was founded only by white men, for white men, and that was landed white men. And the women didn't get the vote until 1920, and the African slaves didn't get the vote until 1964, 1965, or thereabouts. There were some exceptions in certain states or counties where Negroes or colored people, or whatever you call us, were allowed to vote. But for the most part, the most of us did not have the legal right to vote until the passage of the 1964 Civil Rights Voting Rights Act, and then the 1965 subsequent Civil Rights Bill. So we have a lot that we can point to demonstrate that this has never been and is not now a full democracy. Remember, the Native Americans were slaughtered and eradicated and exterminated, whatever other aided words that you can come in, put in their place. They were driven off their land and not allowed to vote, and not counted as members of the United States, even now. So we still haven't accomplished the ideal. It's an ideal, it's an aspiration, but we have not accomplished that aspiration. It's yet to be attained, where we have one man, one vote. Remember, we still got to get rid of the Electoral College. If we had gotten rid of the Electoral College, Hillary Clinton would have been president of the United States because she got the popular vote. And one man, one vote means she won the popular vote, and she should have been president. But because we had the Electoral College, where you had the representatives of the various states to cast their ballots, you got Donald Trump. And you see how white supremacy continues to rule, and you see how the legacy of slavery continues to follow us. Because remember, electoral college came up way back in slavery time, and is a successor of the 3/5 clause. And so we still are smacking up against the legacy of slavery here in America. I wanted to get to the fact that LeVar Burton this week says there is a lot of retrenchment, and he used to have a Reading Rainbow on PBS for years, and he would read certain books, sections of books, and it was a big help to the young children. But we are banning books now in our country. Toni Morrison's books have been banned. James Baldwin's books have been banned, and a lot of very popular authors, Richard Wright, Ta-Nehisi Coates' books are banned. Miss Nicole Hannah Jones, the 1619 Project is banned in some elementary and elementary schools and in the high schools. And so we have a lot of knowledge that we cannot get to, even though we are jailbreaking the university. But we are going to have to jailbreak the elementary school, the grammar school, the kindergarten, and the high school in order for our children to be afforded the type of education that will not only make them intellectually prepared, but that would make them historically sharp. One thing I hate about growing old is you forget so much. I understand now what the old folks say, boy, I forgot more than you ever learned. Yeah, it's bad. It's a humbling thing when you can't remember on the spot no more like you used to. But not that being said, we pressure on because you can write it down and make notes, and that is what a history book is. It's a written record, and the more thorough that written record is, that's why I like Dr. Gerald Horne's writings. He has one of his latest books is about the counter-revolution of 1836, when Texas, which was a part of Mexico, broke away from Mexico because Mexico was outlawing slavery. And that's why Texas became a country, a state unto itself, because they wanted slavery. And that's why the Alamo, and remember the Alamo, and all of that mess came about because Texas, Jim Bowie, Sam Houston, Stephen Fuller Austin, and all of that crowd were slaveholders, and they wanted to continue to prosper in slaves. And so when President Guerrero of Mexico, who was a black man, by the way, his history has really not been told because the fact that he is black, and even though he aspired and achieved the presidency, and it was under him that slavery was abolished in Mexico. And you can follow the historical record from there. Texas breaks away in 1836, and then becomes a part of the United States in 1845, and then we go at the height of slavery. Many prosperous ranchers and plantation owners were happy with slavery, and the rest is history, as they say. But that's the untold portion. And I was going to make the point that Dr. Gerald Horne tells us about the counter-revolution. He said that the counter-argument to the founding fathers saying that they fought the British to get away from the British because of the fact that they wanted to have freedom. It wasn't that they wanted their freedom. 5 minutes, y'all. It was wanted that they wanted to continue on with slavery, owning slaves. And we know that because it's in the document. Slavery was codified in the U.S. Constitution. And when slavery became more profitable, it continued past 1808 when they stopped importing slaves from Africa. And one of the most prolific places for where they were producing, how shall you say it, where they were breeding slaves was in, of course, the state of Virginia. They were their biggest crop was not cotton. Their biggest crop was they were producing slaves who, by the age of reproducing people who in slavery, who were born in slavery, because you were black by that time, you were born, your mama was a slave, you were a slave. And so that was the genus, and you would call that the criminal genius of the slaveocracy, was that they knew that the government would stop them from importing slaves after 1808 officially. But of course they still kept building ships and sending those ships to buy slaves on the continent of Africa and bring them back to America even after the ban. But that was the end of slavery. But so Dr. Horn said it was because that it wasn't so much that America wanted freedom, because George Washington didn't want freedom. He was doing too good as a land speculator and as a slave owner. It speculated that he owned up to 300 slaves of his own, plus his wife's slaves. And so the United States, when they broke away from Britain, Britain had abolished slavery before the United States, or the 13 colonies as it were at that time, rose up against England. And you remember the Somerset case, or you don't know about the Somerset case, you can read about it, that they said no slave could breathe British air. So slavery was abolished in Britain and England, and so the 13 colonies said, well, we're going to have slavery. So despite the nobility of the language in the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, it was all about money. It was all about slavery and holding people slaves. You could make a big lot of money. You could spend $1 and get $1,700. Well, that was a great a great enticement to a lot of people to come to America and try their skill at slavery, because the land was cheap. A lot of times you could get the land for free, and all you had to do was get you some slaves to work the land and bring in the crop. And one successful crop, hey, you had it made. And so that is par for the course on that. Well, the strike continues, and the Kaiser's out on strike all across the nation. I think 75,000 workers were on a 3-day strike because they are overworked and they want higher pay and want more people, so one person won't have to do 3 people's job. All right, so as we say always, my brothers and my sisters, take my considered advice. If you're working on a job and they don't want to pay you, take my advice and don't work for them. Love you. See you next time. All right, Doc, we out of here.
I just say thank you, Lord.